Hi, my name is Krishona Martinson, and I'm the Equine Extension Specialist at the University of Minnesota. Over the past several years, we've received numerous requests from individuals asking for tips on how to grow and sell horse hay. We felt these tips were best shared by individuals who produce horse hay. Therefore, we've interviewed 5 Minnesota horse hay suppliers and asked them a series of questions. Although these farmers have a relationship with our team through extension and research projects, they are not endorsed by the University of Minnesota.
Monitoring moisture in the baling process is achieved through the old method of feeling the windrows, things like that initially, and then as we're baling in the small square baler, we have a moisture tester in the chamber that gives us a reading every 3 seconds. So we get about 2 different readings on each bale coming out of the baler.
Well, that's changed a lot probably in the last bunch of years. As a kid, it was the old rope test and see if it was brittle and go from there. Nowadays, I've got hand probes. Both balers, the round baler and the small square baler, have moisture sensors on them, so I get a reading about every 3 to 5 seconds, so you know instantly when it's getting too wet or too tough, when it's time to stop or when it's time to go. So that's the biggest factor, is the technology of the moisture sensors in the balers have made it a lot easier.
That's kind of like the lottery ticket on how to do hay. The weather pretty much trumps everything. I mean, if you get a wet spell for a week or two, you can't make progress. Sometimes that does affect maturity, but if the hay gets 2 inches of rain on it, it's not going to be good for anything other than bedding or cover, you know.
And we watch the weather like everybody, but we're less concerned around the timing of cutting and the maturity. And we always err on the early cutting side. So if we have a good weather window, even if from a yield perspective, it would make more sense to wait a week. If we have good weather coming, we'll cut. And I found that it's better to make hay when you have a good, consistent weather window than it is to try to maximize every piece of yield by waiting longer and getting into a shorter production window.
Since most of my hay is for horses, it's an alfalfa grass mix, and I'm looking for tonnage, so I tend to cut on maybe a 35-day schedule versus a dairy farmer would be cutting probably on a 28-day schedule. I'm going for a little more tonnage, and I only push most of my crops 3 times a year versus 4 crops where we're located. And if the rain is coming, I'll hold off and wait a few more days. I'm not going to cut the hay and have it get rained on. I don't have options for chopping or getting rid of it that way, so I try to find the right window and make a good quality hay, even if it is a little more mature. But green is a key factor to horse customers more than feed value, I seem to see.
Species selection, I think every grower has their preference based on their market. We try to grow a mix of alfalfa and orchard grass. Everything that we plant alfalfa and orchard. A lot of horse customers prefer Timothy. Also ryegrass is a good horse hay, and you'll find that in a lot of mixes. The reason we have selected alfalfa and orchard grass is because it's a good complement. The grasses mature and keep up with the growth of alfalfa on regrowth on your follow-on cuttings. If you plant Timothy, you'll have an excellent first crop yield, high volume, but then your second and third cuttings dwindle away, and so your ratio of alfalfa to Timothy or alfalfa to the grass would change pretty significantly.
Most of that is customer driven, you know, what people are asking for, and And sometimes it's a moving target. We have, some years it seems like people want higher alfalfa, some years they want more grass.
I have been fortunate enough to take over fields that have mostly Timothy, orchard, and brome. There's a tiny bit of Kentucky bluegrass in some of the fields.
The species we grow are alfalfa, orchard grass, and Timothy, and that's primarily dictated by what people like to see in the bales. Orchard grass is a higher yielding grass, so we try to use that as much as we can. Timothy is asked for, so we make sure we have that in the mix. And I'm on pretty sandy soils, so the alfalfa is needed to really achieve the tonnage.
It is a long, expensive process. I am very fortunate. All of my equipment is probably from the 1950s. I have my old Alice Chalmers with my Minnesota, I think it's a 56 rake. I have a few 1950s Farmall M's. You have to be able to know how to fix your own equipment, because if you break down, I've got probably 500 bales cut, and if my baler breaks down tomorrow, I need to know how to fix it. It's a lot of time. It's not just as easy as going out, cutting, waiting a day, going out the next day, raking and baling.
I think that's a really hard question. It depends on the size of operation that you have. You can buy a decent hay baler for a couple $1,000s. You'd have some tractor for a couple $1,000s. Hay wagons are generally $1,000 to $2,000. A hay rake, a couple $1,000s. So I would say for fairly modest equipment, 10 to 15,000 to get into something. Of course, our hay production is significantly different than that. We have $100+ thousands of dollars of equipment that we refresh to run the acres that we do. It's hard to judge, but I would say most growers, unless they're doing it at a very large scale and have been doing it in an efficient system for a long time, most people are much better off buying their hay than they are trying to produce their own, even if it's at a very very high cost. They're probably still money ahead to buy.
Don't. But I'll clarify that answer. If you are needing to grow a lot of hay, then you can justify it. But if you're 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 horses and you've got a 5-acre patch, I don't believe that you can buy the equipment, even if it's old, fairly decent equipment, but the maintenance and the hassle of it, just buy your hay from a hay producer.
I would say, talk to some people that have done it and decide if it's really worth it. A lot of people that I know and friends of ours, they've had small acreage and tried to, or wanted to, get a baler, do their own hay so that they could control everything. And usually within a year or two, they kind of figured out that there's a lot of cost going into a bale of hay.
Like I said before, it's not as simple as just buying the equipment and going out and cutting, raking, and baling. Talk to people that do it. Do your research.
Take the dollars you're looking to invest in doing that and maybe add storage to buy more hay at a time when it's reasonable and the quality is what you like, and carry it over from one year to the next into the future. The challenges of growing your own, you can get a lot of money invested in equipment and things, and then if the weather doesn't cooperate with you, you wind up with a bunch of hay that you don't like and are trying to deal with getting rid of.
Probably the best thing to do is just talk to people, find out what they're looking for, what might work for them. For myself, the reputation is way more important than any one particular business deal. We try to do anything I can to keep people generally happy.
It will pretty well take over your life if you try to have a weekend off or a day off. Doesn't matter how, but hay finds a way to interrupt that. So it is a much bigger time commitment than what I think people realize when they first start getting into it.
If you're not a patient or tolerant person or don't have excellent customer service skills, the horse hay market is probably one that you don't want to be in. The market is so hard to define. Each customer has such a unique requirement and purpose, and I can show a bale of hay to somebody and they think it's premium quality hay, and another person will think it's terrible.
The weather is, of course, probably the thing that trumps everything. If you have a good stretch of weather to go and can make real nice hay, it's real easy. Everything goes well, and sometimes the weather changes after you cut, and you just have to kind of deal with it. And,
trying to sell your hay at a certain price, whether it's $6 a bale, because then your neighbor will sell it for $5, and if you sell it for $5, they'll sell it for $4. So trying to, and if you sell it at $4, then they sell it at $3. Someone's always trying to undercut you, and that's where a relationship with a grower and a customer are huge.
My greatest challenge is Mother Nature and trying to work full-time, because growing hay for me is kind of just my way of supporting my habit by feeding my horses. It's not a money maker for me. I'm lucky to break even at the end of the year.